Well, up until Friday, what role did you have in the federal government?
Until this weekend, I served as the director of the Office of Government Ethics. It's a little tiny agency of its own, kind of dedicated to helping employees kind of meet their obligations under the law to kind of put public interest and public service ahead of any personal interest they may have.
And you found out over the weekend that you were out of a job.
That's right.
How did you find out?
Just by email. I received a short, to the point, 2-sentence email from someone with the White House's Office of Presidential Personnel that essentially just said, on behalf of the president, he was informing me that I was removed from my position as director of OGE and thanking me for my service, and that was that.
I hear all the time about people who have gotten that kind of an email. What was your reaction when you read it?
Yeah, it was kind of shock and disbelief, and sort of set in motion sort of a kind of swirl of, it's been a little bit surreal for the last few days. So that's kind of the immediate reaction. I'd say the overall emotion is really one of great disappointment. This job that I was appointed to is supposed to be a 5-year fixed term. So you kind of know going in that you will be serving across multiple administrations. So that was something I was considered. I had considered. I was committed for the 5 years. I was committed to working in good faith with any administration, including this one. I thought we were off to a good start. I really loved our mission and our team. So it's really disappointment at that personal level.
Did you get any chance to make your case to stay?
No. Wasn't really presented that way.
Okay.
And I've actually asked, is there any more kind of indication of the president's decision, and so far haven't heard anything back.
So you've received no reason for why they decided to fire you?
No.
And, there are now at least 8 inspectors general who were fired, a woman who was on the Merit Systems Protection Board, a handful of other people who are either suing or thinking about suing to get their jobs back, or to at least make the legal point that what the president did was illegal in removing them. Are you considering any legal action?
So this is all still so new and sudden for me. I really have no idea what's coming next, and I'm just starting to kind of turn my mind in that direction. So I'm really not sure.
Okay.
I think it sort of underscores the point. The one comfort, right, is it doesn't appear to be personal. I'm in good company, and it really speaks, I think, to an effort to kind of dismantle all of the institutions across the government that are set up to serve as kind of an independent voice for integrity and for accountability.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, it's inspectors general, the archivist of the United States, career Justice Department prosecutors who were prosecuting things like January 6th participants, accused insurrectionists and whatnot, other traditionally nonpartisan positions, all being ousted. It has to worry you at the least that those kinds of government officials are being targeted and appear to be targeted first.
It does. I mean, and again, it appears to be, a sort of organized effort. You asked if there was a particular reason. I don't think there was a particular reason kind of for me or for the work that we were doing at OGE. We'd actually gotten off to a very good start in terms of our review of nominees for the president's cabinet. We had been completing the review for those folks in record time, twice as fast as ever before, taking the same approach, the same care has been done in the past. So it doesn't appear to be about me or even about the work or kind of disagreements or issues with anything that was actually happening with OGE at this time. Instead, it seems to me there's a broader effort to sort of really dramatically kind of shift the culture and values of federal service, kind of away from that notion of public service as a public trust, kind of away from integrity, away from accountability for one's public service. And so, and to instead kind of replace that with commitment to loyalty to the president personally.
There's been a debate raging in recent days across the country over whether what's happening right now is a constitutional crisis, given this focus on officials like yourself who were holding what were traditionally nonpartisan positions and ousting them often late on a Friday night. Where do you fall on that debate over whether it's a constitutional crisis or something else?
Well, I'm not exactly sure how far to go in that regard. I would say, I can speak to my position, what happened to me, and the role of the Office of Government Ethics. It was Congress that established OGE. It was in the wake of Watergate, around the same time as the kind of modern IG establishment was created. And the whole notion and structure was to have an organization still within the executive branch, but able to take a nonpartisan, non-politicized, matter-of-fact, by-the-book approach and be that voice of integrity where it's needed. And so I do think it's true that my removal from this position flies in the face of that vision of Congress. And in that sense, there is a problem in terms of honoring legislation and legislative intent.
So nearly 50 years since Nixon and all the reforms that were put in place, there is evidence, we've seen, that they're trying to chip away at reforms that were put in place then, and that's what's caused so many people such concern.
Right.
So let's say you got on an airplane, sat next to somebody, introduced yourself, explained you were with the Office of Government Ethics, and they said to you, what exactly is that? What's the answer?
Yeah. We're a tiny agency, and our mission is simple: to help employees, officials, from the top to the bottom, kind of meet their obligations, to avoid conflicts of interest, make sure they aren't working on matters that affect their own financial interests, to avoid working on matters that involve organizations or people they have a close association with, to avoid gifts that seem like they're intended to curry favor. The whole point is to help employees meet their obligations to public service, to making sure they're putting the public and service to people all across our country ahead of any personal interest. And so to kind of build confidence of the public that is what they're getting from their government, right? A government that is oriented towards them and not about themselves.
So it's anyone from somebody who collects taxes at the Internal Revenue Service to the Transportation Secretary could look at the guidance your office provides to get a sense of whether or not they may be in violation of federal law.
That's right. And our OGE really does three things. We sort of interpret the law as Congress has created it, issue regulations and guidance to the executive branch about these ethical requirements. The program is really decentralized, right? It's ethics officials in each agency who are the ones talking to employees, talking to officials, giving them guidance, reviewing their financial disclosure reports. So we support them. We make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do in terms of an ethics program. And then finally, we do have a role that's a little more direct, right? And actually that is what the Office of Government Ethics has been busiest with so far. And that is helping each new administration staff up through the ethics review for Senate-confirmed officials.
So that's the other thing you do. You are the clearinghouse for cabinet nominees. And in essence, that you review all of their body of work and their life and the potential conflicts of interest, and then tell the Senate whether or not there are any red flags.
That's right. Yeah, and we don't have a thumbs up or thumbs down on who the president selects. Our job is to help make sure that whoever the nominee is, they're in a position to do their job free of conflicts if they're confirmed by the Senate.
And you pointed out that you had completed the reviews of his cabinet nominees in record time. Is there anything your office may have been doing in the review of those nominees that might have been the reason the White House is dismissing you?
Not that I'm aware of. As I said, we actually completed all those reviews. So, it's a laborious process. We had people working 15-hour days, 7 days a week to move those as efficiently as possible. obviously, for those who are coming into government with very extensive investments and things, they, it's a real challenge to fill out these reports, and people are asked to change their financial arrangements to make sure they don't have conflicts. But we made it through all of those. And my sense is that we had a good rapport with the White House team that works on that set of issues. These are officials I actually worked with long before when I was at the State Department during the first Trump administration. So there's never a kind of problem of personal relations with those working ethics for this administration. And my sense is there was no kind of pending matter that was really a problem.
Sure.
And instead, I guess what I'd say is we're now reaching a point where officials are actually coming into government, right? They're starting to do things. And so while the nominee work goes on, we're also reaching the point where, real substantive ethics issues with how officials are comporting themselves as part of their jobs will start to bubble to the surface.
And what are you worried they may do that they're not supposed to do?
Well, it's more my sense that the president really doesn't want an Office of Government Ethics that's in a position to just show that it's taking those issues seriously. We aren't, or I shouldn't say we, as my former agency, but the Office of Government Ethics is not an enforcement body. We don't make determinations that someone has violated the law or not, but we do stand up and ask that people take these obligations seriously and that they're looked into.
Of all the federal government employees that are being eliminated, or the agencies that are being eliminated or merged into others, what's a practical example of what not having you on the job will mean?
Yeah, it's a good question, and this isn't really personal and about me.
Right.
I don't think I personally am indispensable, and I'm not sure that there is anything that immediate. Right? I understand that a lot of people have probably never heard of the Office of Government Ethics. We're mostly kind of internal facing. If OGE does a little bit less training or is a little slower with reviewing a nominee report or issues one less legal advisory, in and of itself, that's not the end of the world. But I do think that over time, as these institutions that are dedicated to kind of upholding integrity and public service are eroded and unable to be that kind of independent voice, we really will lose a lot as a country. We, as citizens, we can tolerate a government that has policies we don't agree with. But I think our buy-in as citizens for government will really start to erode if we think that they aren't trying to help the country as a whole, but are really just in it for themselves.
Can I ask you a more specific case that you may have come across when you were running this office or might have foreseen coming? The president has hired Elon Musk as what's classified as a special government employee, which you can apparently hire for about 130 days. So through the end of May, conceivably. Are you familiar with that kind of employment classification?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is a special government employee?
It's a good question, and there's a lot of confusion around it because people focus on the special part, and when in fact, for the most part, the ethics rules that apply to Elon Musk or anyone else who's serving as a special government employee are largely the same. They still are subject to the financial conflict of interest rules. They still are subject to the ethics standards of conduct and so on. But
before you were ousted, did the White House send you anything regarding his hiring as a special government employee?
Well, I don't really want to comment on kind of specific communications that the Office of Government Ethics had with the White House, but I can just explain a little bit more about SGEs in this system, right?
Sure.
And I mentioned that the ethics program is largely decentralized, right? We at the Office of Government Ethics work directly with regard to nominee vetting, but for the millions of federal employees, their contact is with ethics officials at their agencies. Financial disclosure reports are filed with their agencies, and in this case, the agency would be the White House. So it would be ethics officials at the White House who would be responsible for kind of ensuring that any vetting, paperwork, process, ethics training,
Yeah.
and so forth were delivered.
Okay.
So I'm sure it would be, for someone of this stature, it wouldn't be unusual to consult, but it's not as though there was a process that would have required
Got it.
an OGE role.
So then let me ask you this. Is a special government employee of that stature working for the president ever supposed to make public financial disclosures?
Well, that's a complicated question as well. Sometimes, yes. So the rules are essentially that if you are in the kind of position that would normally require a public financial disclosure report based on the kind of appointment you have, the kind of responsibility you have, or your salary, then you still have to file a public financial disclosure report. If you're hired in a different capacity, then it doesn't mean you don't have to file any financial disclosure report. If you're designated as a special government employee, because you do still have these outside entanglements, you are required to file a confidential report with your agency.
So the White House would conceivably be getting some kind of report from him, but they're not obligated to release it publicly.
Right.
Okay. Can someone like him get a waiver to be exempt from federal criminal conflict of interest statutes?
Well, yes, the president and agencies are empowered to issue waivers for conflicts of interest. The standard is whether the financial interest at stake is really insignificant enough that the conflict doesn't raise serious concerns about one's integrity. There's a process for the Office of Government Ethics to consult on those, and ultimately a waiver should be made public.
Okay. So if the White House ethics folks have been reviewing him and know that he is a client of or does business with the Defense Department and other federal agencies, conceivably, they would have either consulted with OGE or they'd be establishing barriers around those conflicts of interest?
Hopefully. And, I don't want to speak too much because I don't know what Elon Musk has been up to. And I don't know what guardrails or barriers are in place. So I wouldn't want to speculate too much. But one would hope he's getting good guidance.
But this is a good example of what you're concerned about. That people like him, vast wealth, who do business with the federal government, are being brought into the mix of public service, but may not be adhering to the traditional public service rules and ethics, which then may erode the public's perception of what it means to be a public servant.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, it is a real challenge for someone with that kind of wealth and those connections with government to come in and steer clear of all the potential ethics pitfalls. And so we want to make sure that there is an independent, kind of trusted, by-the-book source of guidance for them to help navigate that process.
Over the 4 years of the first Trump administration, there was a lot of concern about whether the guardrails would hold. You think they're going to hold over these 4 years?
I don't know, and I guess I will be watching from the sidelines now.
Well, David, thank you for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hopefully we'll talk again.